Coach, this has been awesome so far. Thanks for all your thoughts. We could probably keep going for another couple hours on all this stuff, but at this point, we do want to transition now to a segment on the show we call Start, Sub, or Sit. For those potentially listening for the first time, we're going to give you, excuse me, we're going to give you three options around a topic, ask you to start one, sub one, and then sit one, and then we'll discuss from there. So, Coach, if you're set, we'll dive into this first one.
Absolutely.
Okay. So historically, your defenses have been terrific at generating steals. You've always been the top percentage of Division One basketball in generating steals. And so we're going to give you three different areas where uh, you can increase, I guess, your steal percentage in a low risk way. So you would be comfortable having your team being aggressive in these three scenarios. And these are three scenarios where we're quoting saying that the offense is kind of like blind. So I'll explain it as we go. But option one is trying to generate steals against blind ball handlers, whether it's in a gap, up full court, whatever it is, a ball handler is blind, you're going to go for that steal there. Option two is blind posts players. Start operating back to the basket, try to get a steal dig or whatever there. Or option three is what we're just terming blind outlet passes or passes where players rebound it and they're blindly kind of throwing it up the court and you're okay being aggressive there. So generating steals on blind ball handlers, posts, or outlet passes.
Guys, I can't tell you how many of your podcasts I've listened to and struggled with the answer to start, sub, and sit. I'll do my best. I definitely sit the outlet passes. That one's actually pretty easy for me because if we're in transition defense, then I want to be really good in transition defense and run the heck back. If we're pressing, then yeah, we'll steal the ball, but I don't know if it'll be as blind if we're pressing.
Mhm.
I would actually say the other two go together. So the post player is a ball handler, but if I had to start one, I would say the ball handler and then sub the post player. I think the biggest evolution for this one, guys, and when I was at VCU, we pressed on every single possession.
Mhm.
Now, people ask me all the time, why don't you do that anymore? Well, it's a long answer. There's a variety of reasons.
Mhm.
Um, One of them is the game is officiated differently. It really is than it was 15 years ago, particularly out on the floor. Another one is the higher level you go and the better teams that you play, the more ball handlers and decision makers they have. And so we really want to game plan and focus on beating the very best teams on our schedule. Well, the very best teams on our schedule are the best teams in the country. Anyway, the biggest evolution with pressure defense, which we still utilize some, is being less rigid and allowing guys to make more reads. So, what I would really, really start, to your point, Dan, is guys being able to make the read to go get the ball or even go put two on the ball when it makes sense. And that's a long, long explanation that we don't have time to get into in terms of when it makes sense. It's definitely an art. Some guys are really good at it. We've got a guy on our team, Chase Ross, that's almost like a free safety playing basketball. He's really good at just knowing I'm going to leave my guy and I'm going to go get the ball. Most of the time it works out. Every once in a while it doesn't. So it's certainly a risk. But I would say that read and that, nuance of not necessarily we're planning to always go this time. Not necessarily we're planning to always go with this player or on that offensive player, but factoring in all that stuff.
Okay. Coach, I want to start, I guess, with sort of more philosophical on all of these. And you just talked nicely about, your change as a coach a little bit and the reasons, but what's the balance of in teaching to be aggressive and potentially go for steals or make the read and the decisions and then if it's wrong, so like you don't want players just fake hustle flying around going for steals versus actually going, and I guess especially early on here in the first month or two as you're instilling this stuff with your team, like what does that look like so that they're compact as a group, but also they have the aggressiveness?
Well, it's a very timely question, Dan, because we just started school yesterday. And on the first day of school, we put in one of our full court defenses. And so, to your exact point, we told our guys we want to be extremely aggressive, but never reckless. And again, it's a nuance. The more aggressive you are, the more you ramp up that dial, there is going to be a level of risk on the back end. I mean, even just thinking about extending your defense beyond the 3-point line, you're stretching the floor out and giving the other team more space. So it better be worth it. I think the Indiana Pacers this past year were a very, very good example of a team that played with great aggressiveness and great physicality. Some people would even say, I know you had Jeff Van Gundy on recently, and some people would even say, it's too much. But I don't think they particularly put themselves at a lot of risk on most possessions with the way that they played. And so obviously it worked in their favor, and they were able to win some playoff series against some teams that maybe on paper other folks thought were better than them, and they just wore them down.
For sure. And Pat, can I follow up one
Yeah,
more?
yeah, go ahead.
And then also the teams on your schedule, like you mentioned, are the best in the country. When you're talking about being aggressive and generating steals, extra opportunities, how much do you and your staff think about, blowing up or being aggressive on actions versus great players? Because like you could try to take them out of their stuff, or you could try to take a player out of their stuff, like just the balance between scheme versus personal aggression defensively.
Well, I think first of all, understanding that no matter how good you are at stealing the ball, the majority of the possessions on defense, the other team's going to get a shot. So I think it's really important not to lose sight of the fact that there are certain type of shots that we want to force, and then there are certain type of shots that we do not want to allow. And then, of course, there's the rebounding side.
Yeah.
And absolutely, the more you extend yourself, the more you switch, the more you fly around and you're in rotation, you can put yourself in some tricky situations as it relates to rebounding. But I definitely, to answer your question, would err on the side of personnel over actions. Actions are obviously important. When you play UConn, for instance, you're going to see 17 actions in one offensive possession. So you better strap on your seatbelt and find a way to continue to guard, multiple actions. But the personnel is what matters. And if I could get our guys to internalize one really, really advanced, tricky concept, it would be what we call appropriate help, which is based on our personnel, based on their personnel, based on where they are on the floor, based on the time, based on the score, based on everything. How much should I help my teammate versus how much should I stay relatively close to my man? And that includes a random time of, running off my guy to go trap. That includes what the Pacers were really, really good at, which is when a team sets a pick and roll in the backcourt against a full court man-to-man press. They were really good at turning that into an advantage for them, putting two on the ball and saying, hey, go ahead and throw it to the screener at 80 feet. We're not as worried about him bringing it up the floor. That's appropriate help as opposed to the point guard bringing it. That's a concept that I would say the vast majority of teams on the defensive end come up short in. And I need to do a better job coaching it because the teams that are really good at that, they have a major leg up.
For sure.
And Coach, that was that was going to be the same vein as my follow-up, and empowering your defenders to make reads and trying to teach appropriate helps. Maybe it can be aided when you are doing a press segment and you're going to try to speed up your offense and you're going to encourage aggression. But when you get in like the half court, how are you currently thinking or trying to train like this appropriate help, or knowing when like the right read can be applied? Like that was a blind ball handler, but you also don't want your offense to always be blind ball handlers.
Absolutely. If the three of us sat down and we watched film together. It could be of anyone. It could be our team, your teams. It could be an NBA game. Every defensive possession, there's a ton of examples of appropriate help. I'll give you guys a couple. And this drives all of us crazy as coaches, right?
Mhm.
The ball is on the left wing. A player, he could even be a great shooter, but let's just say he's a lesser shooter, is standing at 35 feet above the top of the key.
Mhm.
The ball is driven from the left wing with the ball handler's right hand into the paint, deep paint, for either a foul, gets fouled, or scores a layup, or kicks it out for an open shot. Why are we holding hands with that guy at 35 feet? That's appropriate help.
Yeah.
So that's one example. You mentioned putting two guys on the ball. Teams like to run ISO situations, maybe at the left elbow, driving right, where they've cleared all but one player on the offensive end through to the left side so that there's a huge gap to drive into. Well, appropriate help means one of those defenders of the guys that's cleared through to the left side, you got to go get the ball, man. We can't just let this guy rip it from the left elbow with his right hand and go down the boulevard and lay the ball up or draw the third foul on a guy with 18 minutes left in the game. So those are just a couple examples of appropriate help. I think anytime a team traps the post, it's because they feel like it's either what they do every single time or they feel like it's appropriate help. Man, we got to get the ball out of there. Like, this guy's bothering us. It's a problem. Same thing on pick and roll. Anytime a team decides, like, hey, we're going to trap this guy in pick and roll. We had a really good player last year, Cam Jones, who plays for the Pacers now. And if I was playing against him, I would have trapped him in pick and roll every time. Now, most of the time people switched against him, and in some cases it was pretty effective. But Cam was so much better on offense than everyone else on our team that it's like, man, get the ball out of his hands. That's appropriate help.
Mm-hmm. And Coach, my follow-up, and maybe it takes us a little bit off. I mean, still on the defensive end, but moving away from steals and appropriate help. But looking at help, when you're building your defensive identity, building your rotations, how much do you and a staff think about like practicing failure defense? So, like, for example, if you're no middle, how much do you talk about, well, what happens when they break middle? I guess how much do you guys think about, yeah, repping it, or when to introduce it, or when to talk or not talk about it?
We work on that every day once we get into practice. We work on it in two different ways. We work on it where literally the defense just has less guys.
Mm-hmm.
So 5-on-4, 4-on-3, 2-on-1. When I was a young coach, I went to a clinic and heard Bob Huggins talk about working on outnumbered situations. And he explained why. And from that moment on, I was sold on, if I ever get to coach a team, we're going to do outnumbered situations. So we do a lot of that. But then we also do situations where the guy defending the ball handler got beat.
No.
And so we're not outnumbered, but we are going to be in a rotation. And I'll tell you, St. John's won our league last year. They did a phenomenal job. And if anyone wants to watch, teams rotate and switch onto the ball handler and then help each other, watch St. John's, Coach Patino's team from last year. They were terrific. And then watch the NBA champions. They were phenomenal at, people have different terminology for it, but, let's say you're guarding Dan and Dan goes by you and I'm guarding someone else and I step up and take Dan and then you take mine, or someone else takes mine and you take theirs.
Mm-hmm.
Oklahoma City at the pro level, and then St. John's last year at the college level, two great teams to study for working on. So we work on that every day. Obviously need to be better at it because we're not as good as those teams.
And when you're working on those situations that, like you said, there can be, maybe you're introducing more gray in terms of what the defense has to try to solve. I guess, what is it that you're keeping an eye on or really trying to coach to? Because again, it's like the failure, maybe it's out of our normal set of rotations, but every play is going to now be different. I guess, what is the focal point, or what are you putting your attention on to try to help your guys work through that?
comes back to appropriate help, and then an understanding of what are we okay giving up?
Hmm.
Because I think a lot of times we fall into this trap of we want to take everything away,
Yeah.
but particularly when you're in a disadvantaged situation. So whether it's outnumbered or whether a guy is beat, man, like if we press pause on the video and the three of us said, "Hey, it's not going to be perfect, but we're going to end up forcing them to take a contested jumper." Yeah, we'll take that. We'll live with that. And so, for example, when we do 2-on-1, man, we just no layups or dunks. Okay? If we can not give up a layup or dunk, you've pretty much won. Now, they might make a 5-foot floater. They might make a pull up, but in a 2-on-1 situation, you can't take that away. You can't take everything away. If you come up to take away the pull up, he's going to pass the ball. And
Yeah.
then it's going to be a layup or dunk. And so I think understanding what you're trying to take away or what you're trying to force, that informs the appropriate help.
For
Yeah.
sure.
All
Good
right.
stuff. All right, Pat.
All right, coach. Keeping it moving here. Our last start sub sit for you, going to the offensive side of the ball and looking at, I'll call it like pick and roll geometry. So if to frame it, if your ball screen is struggling, your ball screen offense, I guess we're putting our focus now on the angle of the big and how they screen, and what would be maybe a fix. Your start would be like the fix that you think could help improve your ball screen, or you would prioritize. And so the first option is just looking at the approach angle of the big or the screener. Are they coming north, south, east, west? Like how you would maybe think about adjusting that. Option two would be the actual screening angle being set, trying to fight for the right angle or the angles you want to set screens. Or option three would then just be how we call it the exit angle, how either the big's rolling out or popping out to help stress the defense and improve your ball screening offense.
I knew you guys were going to stump me on one of these. uh, I think that obviously all those things are important, and what's more important is what the defense is doing to inform who you start, sub, and sit on that one.
Mm-hmm.
But just generally, I would say, I guess I'll start with the approach, because if you can approach the pick and roll or the action, and we talk a lot about pick and roll, but there's 4, 5, 6, 7 different things you can do in that two-man action. If you win the approach, then that's going to put you in a really good position to win the rest. So, for example, on defense, we tell our guys, you got to be Velcro, which means you got to be attached to that big as he's running up to the action. So if we can win the approach by being anti-Velcro, that gives us a good start. So I'll start that. Then I'll just go into order. We say before, during, and after. So you pretty much gave us that. I'll sub the during, which is the angle of the actual action, and then I will sit what happens afterwards. But in this case, guys, I'm playing a deep bench, so I'm playing everybody. They all matter. A couple things with that. I think the actual screening angle is a way to mess with their ability to be Velcro. So just like, teams, I think you guys called it on a recent podcast, ram screens, which is a testament to my predecessor, Anthony Grant at VCU, who popularized the ram screen with a great player named Eric Maynor. He would screen for the screener. Yeah. And then that guy was not Velcro, and Eric did the rest. And so all of us in the Billy Donovan coaching tree stole that for years and years and years. And now it really the credit should be given to Billy, because now it's been popularized everywhere. Well, that's a way to be anti-Velcro, but also the angle and what you do with your hips or whether you rescreen is a chance to confuse or mess up the big defender or the help defender. Then again, Nowadays, there's more and more switching, particularly against teams like the team we had last year that didn't have great team quickness.
Mm-hmm.
We have a much different team this year, but last year it really made sense to switch our team because the difference in quickness between our 1 and our 5 wasn't a huge difference. And so how you impact switching, how you counteract it. We have a whole edit that we watch religiously with our guys called Switch Attack, because there's a lot of different nuances you can do to try to confuse the switch, and if there's anything you can do to make it unclean, then you have a chance to get downhill. But as you guys know, defenses have gotten really, really good at being able to switch cleanly. So it's like I learned back in college, runaway social intelligence was one group, invented something and came up with a way of doing things. And then the other group across the world learned about it and they came up with something better. And then the first group had to come up with something better. And that's what's going on with all these two-man actions. So we're in the process of trying to figure out how to do something better against switching. But then this year, I bet less people switch us. So that's one of the fun things about coaching is you better have an attack against whatever it is that they might do.
Coach, when looking at the screening angle, are there different angles you're actually fighting for based on the coverage, or are you really just trying to fight for one like flatter angle that can, yeah, if you're switching, keep the guard on the high side. If they're dropping, and get your guard down low, or if they're hedging, then we're just going to roll out because they're giving us the advantage.
Well, Patrick, you guys ask such good questions because there is a simple answer and then there's a complicated answer. The simple answer is yes, we want a back pocket angle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if you had that old school, remember those shorts that the gym teachers used to wear with the pockets in the back? You want to screen that pocket. All right, that's the simple answer. But absolutely, there's times where you want to adjust. I remember one year when I was at Texas, we played against Baylor, and Scott Drew is a phenomenal coach. And at that time, with our team, it was come hell or high water. We were going over the screen. We were getting over the top of that screen. So what did Scott Drew do? He's a great coach. Man, he set that screen, had his guys setting that screen at an angle that makes no sense in the world to go over. But you know what? If you're playing against a stubborn coach or a stubborn team and they say this is the way we're going to do it, then you can adjust and counteract what you do with that. I'll give you another example. Jackson Hayes is the best pick and roll big I've ever coached. He was so good at it that he only could stay at Texas for like 8 months because he played so well. He was out of there. He screened guys about 1 out of every 10 times. The other 9 times, he was gone. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't so much about what his angle was or, hitting the back pocket. It was, man, if you can get the defender to go over the top, you are out of there. And he got so good at it. I remember there was a play. We were in Vegas playing against North Carolina, and there was a play where he sprinted out of that screen. He dropped his hips, and he sprinted out of that screen so fast. And we had a guy named Kerwin Roach. He threw the ball up so high, and Jackson went and got it and dunked the ball. And I just happened to catch the eyes of an NBA scout that was sitting across the court. And it registered in my mind, this guy's not going to be around very long. Because that's what they like to do up there, too.
Yeah. Pat, do you have another follow-up or can I?
I do, but go ahead. You can tell.
You go ahead, Pat. You go ahead. I'll go. Yeah.
Coach, my follow-up is kind of looking, well, not, again, talking about angles, and you mentioned like the hips, but when you're looking at like flipping screens or if you want to play re-screens, are these something that are more like called, or can you coordinate where it is a random like flip or a re-screen and that the guard and the big are like working on the same page, or is it more something like it's a coordinated action to try to beat a specific coverage or scout?
It's all the above. But if you watch the very, very best players in the NBA, it ain't a call. Like those guys are just doing it. Now, for years and years, all of us that do any type of, split game or pinch post or 5 out have tried to emulate the Denver Nuggets and Nikola Jokic. Well, there's a reason there's only one of him, and he's maybe the best to ever do that specific thing in basketball. This is why, guys, I think one thing that's really, really underrated that we all can do a better job coaching is getting our players to spend time in the gym without us together, either walking through, jogging through, or playing live the exact actions that you're talking about, Patrick.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew we were going to be really, really good when 3 years ago, when we had Cam Jones and Oso Ighodaro, who would constantly go in the gym and they would just play around with actions. And they'd play around with the flip. And they'd play around with twisting their hips. They'd play around with the rescreen. They would play around with slipping out of it early and then going to something else. And they would even send me, they'd like have a manager video them doing something, and they'd send it to me. Coach, what do you think about this? Is this something that we could do? And they would want it to be a play call. Absolutely. They'd want to put it in as a play call. But I would also say to them, hey, you guys can do that. Anytime we're in an empty by yourself over there, the two of you guys can do that. That's completely up to you. And Oso was good at handling the ball, so sometimes the action could get inverted where Cam was a screener and Oso was a ball handler, and that's when you can really do fun stuff. But that's when you're really onto something. I think that in this day and age, we're so used to telling the players exactly what to do, but then we go out there and we watch the very best teams, and the players tell us what to do. And so if we can cultivate, and guys, this goes back to the original conversation about consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
If we can cultivate a mindset of curiosity and passion, that just the intersection between those two things for how do we score a basket? You know what I mean? Like one basket.
Yeah.
And how do we do all the things that lead to that great shot, that lead to that basket? And how do we do all the things that lead to that paint touch, that lead to that great shot, that lead to that basket? And the more curious our guys are for that, the better our teams are going to be.
For sure. Coach, my kind of final question on all this, I've always appreciated how good your teams are in empty pick and rolls. And a lot of the things I see that are interesting is what you do around that empty, either before it or on the back side of it with your spacing. And I guess just asking more about the efficiency of getting to an empty ball screen and putting the other players in tough situations to guard before it. So, for example, go screening from the corner before an empty, or having that really high slot spacing on the backside. If it's hit too close to home, you don't have to answer. But I guess the question is thinking really about, we're talking right now about the two players together and their synergy. But obviously, there's a lot of stuff you can do before and around it to help that efficiency, and how you've thought about the complexity and simplicity of that to help your ball screen stuff.
Well, everything you do before is simply to put you in a better position in that empty. And so, in other words, if Dan, you took 5 guys out there and you put them in an empty, and Patrick, you took 5 guys out there and you put them in a defense, Patrick would be at an advantage if he knew you're going to be an empty. He knew exactly where your guys were going to be. They were standing still, and he could load up. He could do exactly what he wants to do. Obviously, the flip side of that is Patrick's team's running back in transition. That's a good example. They're not all the way matched up. They got the wrong guys on different guys, and you sprint into that empty, and you're going to be a lot more successful, Dan, in that situation. So, yeah, we've tried to do – I was lucky. I worked for Billy Donovan, and I was hoping to be there for like 10 years. And the AD from VCU called me, and I literally almost didn't take that job because I didn't know that I was ready to be a head coach. And I wanted to learn more from Billy. One of the things that he brought to college basketball, I think, before anyone else, was the action before the action, and particularly with pick and rolls. So multiple pick and rolls. You know, it used to be that most of us just, hey, we're going to set a spread pick and roll, or we're going to set an empty, or we're going to set the flat one, and then we're just going to try to score off of that. Well, Billy understood if that first one puts the defense in any type of compromised situation, even if we don't score off of it, now on the next one, they're not going to guard it as well. And so, to your point, Dan, that's some of the stuff that we try to do before we get to the empty. Tyler Kolek was the best at that. And he did a really good job of attacking on the initial action so that you better not just wait for the empty. Like, he might get you on that first part, too. And I think a good way to understand it is if you're going to put the three other guys on the court, on the other side of the floor, then the empty can pretty much be whatever you want. I mean, the angle could be as extreme as completely downhill, or it could be something that Bill Self has done forever and it's really, really tough to deal with. Literally, the ball handlers got the ball almost on the baseline at like the short corner almost, and now you're setting an empty going uphill towards the middle of the floor with all kinds of space. I mean, your empty could be anything between those two things, and it doesn't have to be, we call them hits. It doesn't have to be ball screens. It could be a get where you're catching the ball. It could be, I think you called it, Dan, a ghost. It could be you're twisting your hips. So there's a lot of different ways you can go about it. But yeah, we absolutely have tried to be a threat on whatever we're doing before, so that it leads to us being in a good situation when the empty occurs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then there's also the manipulation of the guys on the backside, which that's a whole nother podcast, I'm sure. I used to say, hey, err on being in the perfect spots. But now, man, with the way that teams load up, and one year we were in the Big 12, and I think we had 5 of the top 10 defenses in our league. Literally. And these guys were loaded up and they were playing man to man, but they were damn near in a zone off the ball every time. And it's like, yeah, you can be in the perfect spots, but if they're not looking at you, you better cut.